Hi everyone, my name is Karolina Kotorowicz-Jasińska. I'm a teacher of English with now more than 20 years of experience. I'm also a teacher trainer, an ELT consultant and an ELT author, and I would like to welcome you to the OPTIMISE Stars Tricks and Tips series. In the first episode, I'm going to talk about tricks and tips for developing listening skills in an exam classroom. In this short video, I'm going to present 4 major guidelines concerning teaching listening, followed by 4 tips which will hopefully make your listening-based lessons even more effective. Point number 1. Teaching and testing. Let me start with something absolutely basic, that is the difference in approach towards listening comprehension in the classroom, namely teaching and testing. When we teach exam courses, we always face a potential trap. That is, very often, instead of truly developing the learner's listening skills, we focus too much on checking out how well our students are doing. In other words, we tend to give students one exam task after another to find out how many points they would score in an exam, instead of properly develop their skill, instead of providing proper training. So my first tip for today will be, don't just test, teach. Now, how to go about it? The easiest way would be to depart from a typical procedure of 2 playbacks per recording. I agree that in an exam room, students listen to a recording twice, but in a lesson that is supposed to develop their listening skills, they should be allowed to listen to the recording as many times as necessary. We can play and replay not only the whole recording, but also parts of it. For example, those parts that your students find the most difficult to understand. We might also stop the recording halfway through and ask the students to repeat the last sentence they have heard. And now this leads us to point number 2, word recognition. As a rule, poor language listeners have problems with decoding the message linguistically. In other words, students with underdeveloped listening skills are unable to hear the exact words and phrases in the message that they listen to. Good listeners, on the other hand, have no problems with detecting what words and phrases are spoken. They do it without much effort, and they don't need to compensate for what they have missed. Hence, our job as teachers is to help learners develop their word recognition and speech segmentation skills. One of the best ways to do it is dictation, and that's my tip number 2. In order to help students develop their listening skills, or word segmentation and word recognition in particular, introduce dictation activities. How is this method going to help? Well, first of all, students need to listen to the dictated text and process it word for word, which helps them develop their word recognition skills. But apart from that, in a dictation activity, students need to hold a particular word or phrase in memory and also write down what they have heard. Now, this particular set of sub-skills is exactly what students need to use in open tasks in listening paper of any Cambridge exam, like the one you can see in the screen now. Point number 3 is comparing meaning. Very often, it is not enough for language listeners to just hear the text word for word. Especially in an exam, students have to compare what they hear with what they read in the exam task. In other words, they have to look for synonymous expressions or phrases. They have to decide if the words used in the recording mean the same as the words used in an exam task or not. Therefore, it is useful to enrich our listening-based lessons with such activities that make students compare the language of the recording with the language of the exam task. An example of such an activity you can now see on the screen. In this activity, students first read an excerpt from a recording based on which they have to decide which word will complete a sentence summarizing it. Let me read it out. I really enjoyed our holiday together. It wasn't busy, so there was plenty of space in the pool. The students have to decide whether, based on this part, this person liked or didn't like the fact that there weren't many other people. And now the final tip for this episode. Teach the students to predict the content of the recording. Now, from the psycholinguistic point of view, predicting the content of the recording activates students' schemata. That is, a kind of mental framework of knowledge and experiences they have. Such an activation makes this framework in their minds ready for new information and therefore makes the subsequent comprehension easier. Now, you will agree with me that in the classroom, we usually prompt such prediction processes before we play the recording. In an exam room, however, the candidates are left alone. So what is it that we can do to build that habit of making predictions before every listening task? For example, we can underline the importance of reading the questions carefully before the recording is played. Let me show you an example. In this sequence, the students are explicitly told what to do. Namely, you will hear the context sentence and then there will be a pause of 8 seconds. During the pause, read the question and the answer options. Think about words you might hear for each answer option. Now, every time the student reads the question and the context sentence, his or her schemata are activated, which makes the comprehension that will follow much easier. This was the last tip that I wanted to share with you. Let me summarize them briefly. Number 1, don't just test, teach. Number 2, introduce dictation activities to build the students' word recognition skills. Number 3, help the learners to compare the language of the recording with the language of the task. And last but not least, build good habits by making students read the questions carefully before the recording is played.